just trying to practice to be more optimistic, to be more curious, to be more open, and practicing these dimensions really help you to not just see the future as something that is decided by other people or that just happens naturally, but it's something that you actually create choice by choice. And then saying, what can I do to really respond to change in a better way, but also sometimes create change that we want to see happening.
Dr. Frederik Pferdt, author of What's Next is Now, How to Live Future Ready, offers us opportunities to proactively create the future we want to live. By developing the 6 dimensions of a future-ready mind state, Dr. Pferdt shows how we can turn changes into possibilities and challenges into intentional choices to create that future. Dr. Pferdt was Google's first Chief Innovation Evangelist and founder of its Innovation Lab. He's trained tens of thousands of Googlers to develop cutting-edge ideas and has taught classes on innovation at Stanford University. He's helped organizations as diverse as the United Nations, NASA, and the NBA embrace change and think and act creatively. His work has been highlighted by Fast Company, Harvard Business Manager, Der Spiegel, BBC News, and many other media outlets. Special thanks to today's host, Lori Murphy, Assistant Division Director for Executive Education at the Federal Judicial Center. Lori, take it away.
Well, hi, Frederik. We're so glad to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Lori, for having me.
What is a future-ready mindset, and why would leaders want one?
Yes, great question. There's a couple of things here that might pique people's interest, which is future, right? Ready, and then mind state instead of mindset. I think Carol Dweck at Stanford University did an amazing job with growth mindset and how it can be helpful in our lives. At the same time, for me, it's about mind state, which is the perspective you have in any given moment that determines how you experience the present. And a future-ready mindset really isn't about predicting the future. It's about developing the ability to create it. And I think everybody wants to create a better future for themselves. And a future-ready mindset really helps you to do that. And for me, leaders who develop a future-ready mindset don't just react to change. They really shape it. And I think that's something that we all can use in our times that are shifting and changing so quickly, with technology advancements, with new laws that are coming up, with evolving societal norms and so forth. And one of the main things is that we really have that interesting relationship with our future, right? Sometimes we have a love relationship with our future where we can't wait to live in it, especially when we are planning and we're looking forward to our vacation or when we're looking forward to something in the future. Sometimes we just hate it, right? Because it's so filled with uncertainty, which creates anxiety. And so for me, I want to really help people to change their relationship with their future. And future-ready mindset is really helpful in doing that.
You say in the book, being future-ready is better than being cautious. And cautiousness is a quality that's often thought of as a good thing, especially in the judiciary. Why is cautious not as good as being future-ready?
It's not a bad thing to be cautious. Caution is necessary in legal decision-making, absolutely. But also excessive caution leads to stagnation. And being future-ready isn't about recklessness. It's about balancing caution with the courage to explore new ways of, for example, upholding justice effectively. And caution usually prevents mistakes. We all know that. If we're very cautious, we make the least mistakes. But future readiness creates opportunities. Excessive caution, again, leads to inaction sometimes as well. And inaction can be more damaging than trying and failing. And so what I recommend is that before rejecting a new idea and being too cautious about it, imagine that it has already succeeded. What steps made it work? That is an exercise that I call a pre-mortem exercise. We all know a post-mortem exercise. When something already happened, we sit together and reflect like what went right and what went wrong. A pre-mortem exercise really helps to really balance that caution with future readiness. Most of the time, our brain creates these dystopian scenarios. What can go wrong? And that really leads to what you just described as too much caution, probably. It leads to stagnation. It leads to us feeling stuck. We need to train our mind, not just thinking about like all the things that could go wrong, but the things that also could go right, because that then creates momentum. And I think momentum is really helpful in moving forward. That allows us to try out the future, to test it, to experiment with it, to see what works and what doesn't work.
Why should we focus more on what we don't know rather than on improving what we already know?
Yes, for me, that's a very important question, because what we already know is thinking about the past. That is something that we've tested, we've tried. But focusing on something that we don't know yet, and there's a power in yet that's also based on Carol Dweck's work, something we want to explore, we are curious about, that pushes us out of our comfort zone. I think that's where really the innovation is. When you look at maps from back in the days, like the 16 and 1700s, the maps were like specifically for sailors, very important. And so those maps had these sea monsters on the edges. And all of those sea monsters signaled to people that you should not go there. You should not go beyond what is known, because there is danger. And what some of the courageous sailors did, they set sail, they went to the edges of these maps, and they discovered that there were actually no sea monsters, but there was something new. And that is for me a great metaphor in our world as well, where we see those sea monsters. Sometimes when new technologies come up, we see the signals that it could be potentially dangerous, or there could be some downsides to it, or there is something unknown yet. What we need to do is we need to really be courageous and dive into that unknown to find out what is working, what's not working. Are there any dangers, or can we discover something new?
In your book, you talk about how we're built by change, but not for change. How does all that impact leaders?
You're talking about something really interesting. Evolution basically helped us to grow and adapt as human beings. So change was always present when we evolved. But we really are not built for change. That means whenever something changes and dramatic changes are happening, we are mostly resisting that change, which means that we are either saying, oh, I don't want to see it. So we turn our heads away for some time, or we are anxious about it. We rarely embrace that change. Truly ask yourself, like, how did you react when the pandemic started, March 2020, or when ChatGPT was announced in November 2022? Big changes for us human beings. And you can really check in with yourself, like, how did you react to that change? And for me, I embraced it. I said, great, this is an opportunity to really do something different. So let's learn, let's explore, let's set sail towards the unknown. And I think everybody can do that.
I said more than once, let's not let this crisis go to waste.
I love that saying. Like, to put it in a more positive, probably metaphor, which is, it doesn't have to be a crisis all the time. Change is something that is happening, but it matters how you react to it, how you respond to it. It's the same. We're here in Santa Cruz, and there's a lot of surfers out there every day, and the waves are happening. Are you waiting every wave to go by, or are you taking a risk and trying to paddle into it and then, stand up and ride the wave? You can't make the wave stop. That's something impossible. But you can choose how you react and respond.
How does an individual having a future-ready mind state fuel partnerships and collaboration and working well with others?
Yes, that's a fascinating question. So I'm really focused on helping the individual to understand how they can shape the future. Because again, the future is not something we should predict. What I think is more important is that we use our own imagination. Imagination is something that we have as human beings, but it's sometimes underused. For me, imagination is really the foundation of innovation. Every legal framework, every policy that exists now started as someone imagining it. And so for me, a future ready leader doesn't just uphold the law, they envision better ways to serve society. And when we allow ourselves to really tap into our imagination, then we really do train our muscles to not just imagine the future, but making the first step towards it. You think about what better ways can I serve my community? What better ways can I be a partner in my relationship? Now, your question was more related to partnerships and collaboration. Collaboration really thrives in uncertainty. So that's the good news because future ready leaders create partnerships across disciplines. If you can bring great leaders together that recognize that you can't have all the answers yourself, but you can co-create solutions, I think you're on the right path. One very important point is that we bring leaders together that come from different backgrounds, that bring different perspectives together, because then we can really think about all these creative solutions from a very diverse point of view. At Stanford's design school, where I teach, I've always seen the best ideas when really diverse teams come together. So there's a lawyer in the team, there's a technology person in the team, there is a business student in the team, there is somebody who is very interested in sports. And if you bring those different disciplines and these different ways of thinking about problems together, really new ideas are emerging. I think that's what we're all looking for. For example, don't start with brainstorming, coming up with ideas. We start with question storming, which means trying to really figure out what's the best question we want to address and we want to ask ourselves. And so what I usually like to bring in is kids and elderly people, because those are usually the people that we really don't bring in that often. But kids are not afraid to ask good questions because they don't fear any consequences if they challenge the status quo. And also elderly people have that wisdom, that experience that really is so helpful when asking great questions. That might kickstart a great process where you really go to the edges of what is known and try to discover something new.
And is it that point that you do the brainstorming?
Sometimes, yes. So one of my classes, we spend about 4 weeks with students on just asking good questions. Afterwards, a graduate student, he was in his 40s, PhD student at the business school, he said, Frederik, this was one of the hardest classes I took because we stayed so long in the what we call the problem space. And he was not used to that because our minds usually like to go to solutions very quickly. Finding the challenge that you care most about and that you want to solve is a process that you have to engage in. And it takes some time to really ask great questions. And the class ended not in students presenting solutions, but they presented their problems and the questions they wanted to answer. And so the students really had conversations together. And that comes back to that partnership and collaboration to say, like, I want to help you to find a solution in how we can solve the mental health crisis in this world. Or I want to help you to find solutions in how we can make clothing more sustainable or produce clothing in a more sustainable way. So that was inspiring because people participated and wanted to join them to really find the best answers. And to close that, I think for me, the best leaders in this world are not the leaders that have all the answers. It's the leaders who ask the best questions.
What I think you've been talking about is compulsive curiosity. You say in the book, the act of questioning is the point.
What for me is so fascinating is that you can really train yourself in asking better questions.
And so we just need to keep staying in that curiosity space a little bit longer, perhaps to the point where we're a bit uncomfortable.
Absolutely, yes. Research also shows that in our early years, we are really, really good in asking the better questions. And when we grow up, that curiosity goes dormant. And I think we can bring it back. We can tap into our curiosity again. And it's getting harder and harder with technology that provides apparently really good answers. And, I was partly responsible for that while working at Google. But we sometimes really lost that curiosity around discovering something new and going where the unknown is. And so that is something we can train ourselves in, and that leads us to also become better leaders.
In the judiciary, being correct, having the answer, these are prized. How do organizations like ours pivot to really deeply consider what's possible more often than we are?
When we consider organizations or even teams, what we found in the research is that the more innovative teams and the more productive and successful teams, they show a high level of psychological safety, which means they allow these individuals to really show vulnerability and allow them to ask really good questions, to challenge everything, to challenge the status quo, to challenge an idea, and so forth. And so that's what we actually can invest in to level up our psychological safety in our teams, in our organizations, to before we go to apparently a good answer or a good idea or a good solution, try to come up with a good question, right? Because sometimes I think we apparently have solved for something that is the wrong problem. You don't want to waste like a year or 2 years to work on an idea or solution where the problem was actually something very different. You also, as a leader, can invest in that by role modeling how you are asking good questions, how you challenge the status quo in team meetings and so forth, and then allow others to follow you as well.
It seems like you might be veering into another one of your dimensions, which is unreserved openness. And why would a leader want to be more open beyond what you've already discussed?
Openness is really that fast track to growth. Putting that into a metaphor, we are walking through life and there are many doors in front of us, many doors that we create in our minds, but also physical doors. And openness means not just trying to peek into that door, but really opening it and stepping through it. Because behind every door, there is something we can learn, that there's something we can discover. And that openness is something we can try and practice. Openness means that you don't know what's going to happen. So you're going to a new restaurant, you're trying some new food, you're trying a different conversation, something unexpected and something new. And that allows you to grow. And I think just embracing that is really, really powerful.
How is openness different from and yet related to transparency?
Transparency is about sharing information, things you know, and openness is actively seeking new ideas. At Google, we're really trying to build a culture of transparency. There was one event in the end of the week called TGIF, Thank Google It's Friday, with our founders, Larry and Sergey, present every week to answer questions from employees. And that is really bringing that transparency to life, which was very important because transparency always leads to trust.
That seems to lead to yet another dimension, which is expansive empathy.
Empathy is really about shifting from I to you, seeing decisions through the eyes of those that you impact. And an empathetic leader really listens more. They create an inclusive environment. They make decisions with the other people also in mind. And so empathy is something really powerful because it brings that human aspect into your leadership and your work. So you're leading with the human in mind and what other people might need as well. And you create solutions that actually work for others. And expansive empathy means that it's not just about understanding other people's perspective, but it's also about empathizing with yourself. And what I mean by that is that there has been some fascinating research when it comes to empathizing with your future self, especially. So when you think about your future self, what the research shows is we see someone foreign. And that is the reason why we actually don't invest that much in our retirement funds. We don't make the healthier food choices. As soon as the researchers have put VR headsets on people, showing them their future selves, and AI can do that. You can create an image where you have grown a little bit in terms of age and so forth, that as soon as you empathize with your future self, and you make that connection, the more it has an impact on your choices that you make right here, right now. They actually showed that most people double the amount of their retirement savings, and they make healthier choices in the right here, right now as well.
Let's talk about another dimension. What role does perpetual experimentation serve for being future ready?
Perpetual experimentation for me means really that learning by doing, learning by trying things out. Instead of waiting for a perfect solution, leaders really test small changes and improve over time. The path to your future is really paved by experiments. And focusing on learning rather than just getting things right is very important. And experimentation always leads to learnings. An experiment really, really can never fail. A very important part of being future ready is not just thinking about these ideas, but creating that movement forward. There's also some fascinating research around anxiety. For example, if we are anxious about the future, you cannot turn anxiety just off. There's no off switch. But what you can do is you can turn on creativity. So as soon as you turn on creativity, you turn off anxiety. Just get creative, making something, writing a letter to someone, or cooking, a creative conversation you want to have with someone. All of those things really turn off anxiety. And that is really something people can try out starting tomorrow morning. We want to write down the 3 things that we want to accomplish today and create that vision for our day. We are already changing our morning routines and we're experimenting. And then we can really see what works for us, what creates a more maybe positive outlook, what creates that feeling that we want to see happening inside us. If we train it in our own lives, we are more ready when it comes to our professional lives. But it's these small things, these small experiments that really make a difference, because then you're really prepared to experiment in all of your life areas that you want to try out something new.
Another dimension you call radical optimism in your book is really kind of a superpower.
Yes, I think the quote goes this way: pessimists are usually right, but optimists change the world. But if you really want to change the world and do something different, I think we need to go for a yes. Too many no's lead to stagnation. Optimism isn't about ignoring risks, it's about seeing possibilities. And so leaders really can train themselves by asking, what's the best that could happen here? Anais Nin famously said that you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. Radical optimism isn't about just seeing the glass half full. It's about seeing the potential to fill the glass even further. So you look for possibilities, and that's something we can also train ourselves in. We choose how we respond to the situation and how we view that situation.
So, the last dimension in your book is what you call Dimension X. So, can you help us understand what Dimension X is?
There's always something very unique about human beings, and that's what I call their superpowers, their unique talent, their unique perspective. And this is something I want to help people to discover and then use more of. And Dimension X is something that we sometimes oversee. And when I did my own soul searching and trying to understand what is my Dimension X, what is my superpower, I discovered that most in my lives, I had this bias towards action, where I was not creating the perfect plan or was not waiting for the perfect moment, but just went for it to try it out. And that bias towards action created most opportunities in my life, but it also got me in trouble sometimes. So just being aware that this is your unique superpower that has mostly positives, but sometimes also can cause some trouble is something very helpful, I think, in our lives. So I might ask you, Laurie, what's your unique superpower? What's your Dimension X if you think about it?
I resonated very much with grit. I probably need to do a little bit more thinking on it, but that suits me for now.
Yes, it's important to say for now, because that Dimension X can change over time. And being aware of that is also very, very helpful. So just think of for yourself, like as a leader especially, what is that Dimension X that makes you unique? And how can you use that in your life and your work even more?
I'm curious, we have 6 dimensions of becoming more future ready in that mind state. We've got some real concrete examples of each of these. What do we do when we put them all together?
I think just becoming aware that these are things that are all within us, and just trying to practice to be more optimistic, to be more curious, to be more open, and practicing these dimensions really help you to not just see the future as something that is decided by other people or that just happens naturally, but it's something that you actually create choice by choice. And then saying like, okay, what can I do to really respond to change in a better way, but also sometimes create change that we want to see happening. And that starts with optimism. It starts with being curious. It starts with openness. It starts with empathy. And I think that's something that we all have inside ourselves, but probably can live by even more when it comes to the future.
Frederik, I know that you've coached executives across many different organizations, and I'm wondering how you think coaching can help leaders get unstuck.
Coaches don't give answers. I think they ask better questions. Technology can actually help us to ask those great questions. If you ask ChatGPT or Gemini or your favorite AI partner, don't ask for an answer, but ask, hey, coach me to become more open leader. Coach me to be more optimistic. That doesn't replace human beings. There's always room for asking your partner, asking your colleagues, asking maybe your team members as well, and maybe do something that is reverse coaching, where we always think we need to have the more experienced person or the wiser person being our coach. I think it can also be the opposite. Maybe ask a child or ask somebody in your community who is someone who you haven't connected with and ask them for some coaching advice. And maybe they can give you good questions to think about.
What haven't we covered today that you think is important for judiciary leaders to know?
I think one of the things that for me always comes up, and that's probably the hardest things for us to do, is to unlearn, to let go. Letting go of outdated ways of thinking is just as important as learning new ones. I've worked with so many leaders and I had them draw their better future or talk about how they envision the future is going to look like and so forth. And then asking them to just get rid of that vision and create a better one. And even that 1 minute where they drew out the perfect vision of the future for themselves or the organization or the team, they really were emotionally connected to that. They couldn't get rid of it. I told them the research shows the second time you're going to think about that, it's going to create a better idea for you, a better vision for you, for your team, or for your organization. But they didn't believe me. They just were like emotionally so connected to their first idea that they were not able to unlearn and letting go. And I think that's one of the things that we all can do a better job of. And so identify maybe one tradition, practice, belief, idea in your work that no longer serves you well, and just trying to let go of that and unlearn, because that creates space for something new.
Frederik, where can we learn more about you and your work?
Yes, I think most importantly, I hope that you've learned something about yourself today, about how you want to be in the world moving forward, and how do you want to feel in the future as well. And I'm happy to help with that. With the book that I wrote, What's Next Is Now, How to Live Future Ready, that is available everywhere. I also write a next letter that is what I say, your one-on-one with your future. We like to have one-on-ones, maybe with a coach or with a mentor or with our partners. This is really your one-to-one with your future, where I help you to take a new perspective, ask a better question, and try and experiment. And I'm also a host of the podcast, The Future is How, where we really discover how you can create a better future for yourself. I hope that this conversation sparked not just new ideas, but also new questions that you want to think about moving forward.
It absolutely did for me. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Lori.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks for listening. For more episodes, visit the podcast link at fjc.dcn/EE. You can also listen and subscribe to the podcast via Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. All episodes are also available on fjc.gov. In Session, Leading the Judiciary is produced by Shelley Easter. Our program is supported by Angela Long, Jamie Mitchell, and the entire studio and live production team. This podcast was produced at U.S. taxpayer expense. Until next time, thanks for listening.